Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the physics class. I hope all of you are safe, healthy, happy as always. Vishnu, can you hear me better? I hope I am audible and visible to all of you. Well, in yesterday's class, we had discussed. We had discussed what? We had discussed the different forms of inducing an EMF. We had seen motional EMF. We had seen induced electric field, both the concept of motional EMF and induced electric field we had discussed. Yes or no? And induced electric field we had discussed. Now, in today's class, we will discuss the phenomena of induction or inductor. Now, what is an inductor? If you have a coil which also has an area. Now, up till now, we were drawing resistances like this. This was resistance, this is inductance L. So basically why we have drawn it like this, so we are assuming that you have a wire, and if you turn it like this, just like a solenoid. Now if you pass current in this wire, what will happen? Because of current in this wire, there will be a flux linkage in the coil itself. Since this coil has an area, there will be a flux link in this coil. Now if I call this flux link in the coil as phi, this flux will be proportional to I. Or if I call the flux in one coil as phi, then the total flux becomes n phi, where n is the number of turns in the coil. So this total flux n phi will be proportional to area, or I can write this as Li, where L is a constant depending on a lot of things. It depends on the geometry of the coil, it depends on the number of turns in the coil, it depends on the medium surrounding the coil. This L is known as the self-inductance of the coil, and I can write it like this, N phi by I, or it is the total flux linked with the coil divided by the total current that flows in the coil. Do we understand this? So this is how we introduce the phenomena of self-inductance. If the flux is 1 Weber and current is 1 ampere, we can call the inductance as 1 Henry. So 1 Henry is the inductance of a coil whose flux linkage is 1 Weber and whose current is 1 ampere. Now, if you start to change the current in this coil, di by dt, the rate, you start changing current in this coil, the flux in this coil will start to change. Yes or no? The flux in this coil will start to change, and this rate of change of flux, rate of change of total flux, that will be equal to n multiplied by d phi by dt. If I take phi as the flux in one coil, will be proportional to the rate of change of current di by dt. Or I can write this minus n d phi by dt is equal to L into di by dt. This L is again known as the self-inductance of the coil. Now this minus n d phi by dt is nothing but the induced EMF in the coil. So this L di by dt will be equal to the EMF which is induced in the coil. This L is known as the self-inductance of the coil, and I can write this L as EMF induced divided by di by dt. If the EMF induced is 1 volt and rate of change of current is 1 ampere per second, the inductance becomes 1 Henry. So there are two ways in which we can understand this property of inductance. One is by the use of flux and other by the induced EMF. Do we understand this, everyone? So this is the property of self-inductance. Now, what is this property of self-inductance going to do? The first thing that you must understand is the way we introduce this. Whenever we have a whenever we have a current flowing through the coil, a flux will be linked in the coil. A flux will be linked in the coil, and I can call the self-inductance as total flux divided by total current. I can call the self-inductance as total flux divided by total current. Do we understand this? The other way of what is happening? Thing is wrong. Just let me check. Okay. So one way of saying this is the self-inductance of a coil is total flux divided by total current. If now I start to change current in the coil, what will happen? An EMF will be induced in the coil because the flux will be changing. Now this EMF induced in the coil can be written as minus L di by dt, where negative sign is because of Lenz's law. This induced EMF will try to oppose the rate of change of current. So that is why you have this negative sign. Do we understand this? So basically N phi, the total flux, is equal to Li. This is one way of writing it. Or the EMF induced in the coil is minus L di by dt. This is the second way of writing it. Do we understand this? Can I have some reason that we understand this? Okay. Now, what are the ways in which you can calculate the self-inductance of a coil? Basically, if you have a circular coil, for example, you assume that a current I is flowing in the coil. Because of this current I, you find a magnetic field created by the coil. Once you know the magnetic field created by the coil, you multiply it by the area of the coil. That will give you the flux linked with one coil. If there are n number of turns, you will have to multiply I by n to get the net magnetic field. Then you again multiply this area by n to get the net flux. So you will have n squared coming into this. To find the total flux, you divide it by the current I. Whatever is remaining in your hands will be known as the self-inductance of the coil. The self-inductance of a circular coil is given by this formula. I hope you remember this formula, yes or no? Can I have some reason that we understand this formula? Okay, on similar lines, you can have a formula. On similar lines, you can have a formula for self-inductance of a solenoid. Now, how will you get the formula for self-inductance of a solenoid? You assume that the area of cross-section is A, current flowing is I, length is L. Then you find out the total current, total flux linked with the coil. You find out the magnetic field, that will be equal to mu naught Ni by L. Then you multiply it by the number of turns and the area. You will get the total flux linkage. Total flux linkage will look like this. Total flux linkage has to be equal to Li. Whatever remains is the self-inductance of the coil. Am I clear? What are the factors on which it depends on? If no iron or similar materials is nearby, that means if it is vacuum, the self-inductance only depends on geometrical factors, length, cross-sectional area, and number of turns. If the medium is different, then it also depends on the medium surrounding it. Am I clear? Can I have some reason that we understand this, sir? You understand this? Hemant, Vishnu, Sailusha, Shrihita. Can I have some reason that we understand this? Okay, great. What type of questions you can have? Simple questions. For example, a current in a solenoid of 240 turns having a length of 12 centimeter, radius 2 is changing at a rate of itna. Find the EMF induced in it. So how will you find the EMF induced in it? EMF induced is minus LDI by dt. Remember, minus sign only indicates that it will oppose the rate of change of current. What do you mean by opposing the rate of change of current? If the current is increasing, it will try to decrease it. If the current is decreasing, it will try to increase it. You just have to find out the value of L. L will be mu naught n square A by L. Calculated it. Magnetic self-induction multiplied by di by dt, and you have your answer for the EMF induced in this solenoid. Are you following me, or am I going too far, too ahead? Can I have reason that we are following me, everyone? Vishnu, Hemant, Sailusha, Shri Hita, are we there, beta? Okay, good. Then, when you have self induction, you have mutual induction as well. Now, to understand mutual inductance, we have normally two coils. One is known as the primary, the other one is known as secondary. Now, what happens in primary and secondary? You all must know this. If you have a current flowing in primary, flux will be linked in primary. If you change the current in primary, flux will change in the primary, EMF will be induced in the primary. That is all self-induction. But if these two, number one, primary coil, and number two, secondary coil, are magnetically coupled, what do you mean by magnetically coupled? Magnetically coupled means that the flux linked in this coil, primary coil, is also linked with this coil, that is the secondary coil. For example, you have primary like this, and then you have secondary on top of it. Flux linked in primary will be linked in secondary. But if you have a primary here and you have a secondary here very far away, the flux linked in primary will not be linked in secondary, and hence there will be nothing to worry about. Whatever you do in primary will have no effect on secondary because they are very far away from each other. In that case, nothing happens. But we are thinking of a case where flux in primary is also linked with secondary. Secondary is on top of it, or secondary is very close to it, as shown in the figure. Primary and secondary are linked to each other by something known as an air gap. There's a very small gap between the two, air gap. Now, if this is the case where the flux linked in primary and the flux linked in is also linked with the flux in secondary, if I flow a current in the primary, I1 or IP, a flux will be linked in secondary. The flux linked in the secondary, total flux linked in the secondary, so NS into phi S, total flux linked in the secondary will be proportional to the current in the primary. Or you can write that it is equal to mutual inductance M multiplied by current in the primary. This phenomena where flux is linked in secondary coil because of current flowing in the primary coil is known as mutual inductance. Now, if I change the current in primary, what will happen? If I change current in primary, what will happen? See, in case number 1, N252 is the total flux linked in the secondary coil is proportional to the current flowing in the primary, or N252 is M into I1, or mutual inductance N is N252 divided by I1. This M is known as the coefficient of mutual inductance. Now, if the current in the primary is changing with time, there will be EMF induced in the primary, but that is known as self-induction. We have already done self-induction. What will happen in the secondary? When current in the primary changes, magnetic field changes. Because of that, flux in the primary changes. Because of this flux change in primary, the flux in the secondary also changes. Now, this rate of change of flux in the secondary is proportional to the rate of change of current in the primary, or the EMF induced in the secondary is proportional to the rate of change of current in the primary, or I can write EMF induced in the secondary will be minus M into di by dt, I1 by dt. This constant M is known as the coefficient of mutual inductance between the two coils. What all factors does this constant depend on? On what all factors does this constant depend on? Any idea? It depends on the number of turns in the primary as well as the secondary. It depends on the area of cross section. It depends on the distance between the two coils. It depends on the medium. What is the medium surrounding it? Now, apart from these 4 things which are obvious, it also depends on how these coils are oriented. If one coil is here, where is the other coil? How is the other coil placed with respect to the first coil? If one coil is here, the other coil is here, the mutual inductance will be more. But one coil is here, other coil is here, the mutual inductance will be very less. So it depends on the orientation of the coil. It depends on self-inductance of the two coils. We'll come to it. There is a formula linking this. It depends on the coupling factor. Again, this coupling factor, these 3 terms, number 1, which is Gola, number 2, which is Gola, number 3, which is Gola, all these 3 terms, this one, and this one, they are linked to each other. All these 3 terms are linked to each other. How are they linked to each other? Anyone knows it? How are they linked to each other? They are linked to each other in this way. M is equal to K into root over L1, L2, where K is the coupling factor between the two coils and it lies between 0 to 1. For ideal coupling, K is 1. For no coupling or 0 coupling, K is 0. Now, when K is 0, what happens is flux linked in first coil is not linked with the second coil. Whatever flux is linked in the first coil remains with the first coil. Whatever flux is linked in the second coil remains with the secondary coil. When coupling factor is 1, 100% of the flux in the primary is linked with the secondary. That is how coupling factor and orientation and everything comes together. For example, see this. Case number 1. This is primary and this is secondary, one on top of other. Whatever flux is linked in the primary is also linked in the secondary, and hence coupling factor or percentage of flux linked is 1 or 100. K is 1 here. Now, if you look at this orientation, the flux linked in this coil and flux linked in this coil has no relation. Here also, whatever flux is linked in the primary and the secondary, they have no relation, hence coupling factor and mutual inductance between them is 0. In both these cases, case number 3 and case number 4, mutual inductance is 0 and coupling factor is also 0. In this case, coupling factor lies between 0 and 1. In this case, coupling factor is 1. So what is this coupling factor? It is the ratio of flux in the secondary divided by the flux in the primary. Do we understand this? And the relation is M is equal to K times root over L1, L2. Do we understand this? Can I have some reason that we understand this, sir? Can I have some reason that we understand this, sir? Okay, great. So that is how you can say that this mutual inductance between two coils depend on these 7 factors. Number 1, number of turns N1 and 2, area of cross section, distance between the coil, medium between the coil, coupling factor L1 and L2, and the orientation between the coil. Now you can note down these mutual inductance ka formula for different configuration. For example, 2 coaxial solenoids. How will you find out the mutual inductance between the two coils? So you let a current flow in the inner coil, find the flux through the outer coil and equate it to M into I. You will get the mutual inductance of the two solenoids. It will be mu naught N1 N2 A by L. Remember this A and L. In this case, both the lengths are taken as same. This A is the area of the smaller coil and not the area of the larger coil. Do we understand this? Similarly, you can find out the mutual inductance between two plane concentric coils, circular coils. Here, you will flow a current in the outer ring or outer circle and find the flux through the inner circle, and you will get a formula of this type. Remember, whether you flow current in the inner coil and find the flux through outer coil, or you flow current in the outer coil and find the flux through the inner coil, both the answers are same. That is known as reciprocity theorem. It is known as reciprocity theorem. Reciprocity theorem. What is this reciprocity theorem? If I flow a current I in the first coil and find out the flux in the second coil, if the flux is phi, then if I follow the same current I in the secondary coil, the flux through the primary coil will also be phi. Do we understand this? Can I have some reason that we understand this? Great. Now, these are the 3 examples that you must remember. 2 concentric circular loops, mutual inductance is proportional to this. Remember, this R1 is taken to be very large compared to R2. So inner circle is very small, outer circle is very big. If I have two square coils, again, remember the inner coil is always very small compared to the outer coil. So basically what you do is you find the magnetic field at the center at this square or triangle. You find the magnetic field at the center of this and multiply it by the area of the inner coil and number of turns of the inner coil. You will get a formula of this nature. Do we understand this? How will you find the mutual inductance of this diagram? Whether it's a square or a rectangle or a triangle, you will find a magnetic field at the center. You will flow current in the outer coil. You will flow current in the outer coil and find the flux through the inner coil. How will you find the flux through the inner coil? You will find the magnetic field at the center of this. We'll assume that the inner circle or inner rectangle or inner triangle or inner square is too small. So magnetic field at the center is the magnetic field throughout, multiplied by the number of turns of the inner coil, multiplied by the area of the inner coil, you will get the mutual inductance of the combination. Do we understand this? Do we understand this? Can I have raise of hands that we understand this?
Yes, sir.
Great. Now you can solve a problem which is of this nature. You must be knowing this problem. So this is one problem that you must always solve. I'll draw this problem for you. Why I'm using this. So what is this? Okay. What is this? This is an infinite wire carrying current I. And this is a square loop. The square length is A. And it is at a distance X from this infinite wire. There is no current in this coil. So why I have drawn current? I should there is no current. The current in the coil will not be given to you. So I should take off this current. And basically you will be given an infinite wire. An infinite wire. This is an infinite wire and a square loop. You have to find the mutual inductance of this. Can you find it out?
అందుకే అట్లా అన్న పెట్రోల్ అని పెట్రోల్ అని అది షాద్ నగర్ పోయినాక అక్కడ హోటల్స్ ఉంటాయి ఇక ఆయన నడిచింది కానీ టక్క టక్క ఓటలేదు ఇక ప్రాబ్లం.
Can you find out the mutual inductance of the system? Are you trying? How will you find out the mutual inductance of the system? It is very simple. How do you do it? You assume that a current I is flowing in this branch, infinite n, and then you will find the flux through this. How will you find the flux through this? The only problem is that magnetic field is variable. Remember, whenever you have a problem of infinite wire, it is always given because they want to have a variable magnetic field. So you take a small segment. The magnetic field here will be equal to mu naught I by 2 pi x. Yes or no? If I say that the number of turns in this coil is n, you find a small flux through this small segment. A small flux through this small segment will be how much? B into A. Angle is 0. So it becomes mu naught I into 2 pi x. Area is A dx. Total number of flux will be multiplied by n. Because there are n number of turns. To find the total flux, you integrate this. Integrate this from x to A plus x. And you will have your answer n mu naught I by 2 pi natural log of A plus x divided by x. Do we understand this? Do you understand this? Okay.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
now there could be a question where what they do is they vary this current with time. So they can give I as equal to I naught sine omega t. They may give I as I naught sine omega t. And then they ask you what is the EMF induced in this coil. So how do you do it? Well, you already have flux. This is the flux. To find the EMF induced, you only do minus d phi by dt. You put the value of I as I naught sine omega t. You differentiate this once with respect to time, put a negative sign for Lenz's law, and you will get the EMF induced in the coil as a function of time. Do we understand this? Can I have some reason that we understand this, sir? Yes or no? Great. So these are the two problems that you must remember here. Both problems are coming from the same concept. So remember those two problems. Now you have inductance. If you have two inductance like this, it is inductance in series. If you have two inductance like this is inductance in parallel. I hope all of you know this. So if inductance are in series, L will be equal to L1 plus L2. Imagining that mutual inductance is 0. So please note this formula. You may not find this. If M is not 0, then there is a problem. Then when current in both is in the same direction, it becomes L1 plus L2 plus 2M. If the current in both coils is in opposite direction, one is clockwise, other one is anti-clockwise, then it is minus 2M. Do we understand this? If coils are connected in parallel, the mutual inductance is 1 by L will be equal to 1 by L1 plus 1 by L2. If M is 0, if M is not 0, it is 1 by L1 plus M divided by 1 by L2 plus M. Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just remember this. They might not ask you, but sometimes they ask you stupid things. That is why I have told you. And then this question, just to check, such type of question can come in your multiple choice. How does the mutual inductance of a pair of coils change when the distance between them is increased, the number of turns is decreased, a thin rod is placed? What will happen? So if the distance between them is increased, the flux link will decrease and hence mutual inductance will decrease. We understand this?
Yes, sir.
What happens if the number of turns is decreased? It is directly proportional to the number of turns. You know that. So if the number of turns is decreased, it definitely decreases. Third point, you must always remember a thin rod is placed between the two. What will happen if thin rod is placed between the two? It's a magnetic substance. The mutual induction will increase because it is proportional to the permeability of the medium. If you put any other medium, permeability will be more than vacuum, and hence magnetic mutual induction, the coefficient of mutual inductance will be different, will increase. Got this? Okay, that was about it. Now, as I already told you in the previous class, inductor or capacitor, they do not consume energy in a circuit. The only thing that consumes energy in a circuit is resistance. Why does this inductor not consume energy? Because it stores energy in the form of magnetic energy. It stores energy in the form of magnetic energy. It will not go into the derivation. How much energy it stores? The energy it stores is half L I square. Remember here the relation phi will be equal to Li. So once you know the relation in terms of L and I, you can find the relation between, you can find the relation of energy between L and phi and I. You can write the energy equation in terms of Li, L phi and phi I. Do we understand this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, remember these small points. After the current has reached its final steady state value, the rate of change of current is zero and no more energy is input to the inductor. When the current decreases from I to zero, the inductor acts as a source and it gives an amount of energy half Li square back to the circuit. So basically, whenever in a circuit there is an inductor, three things will happen. When you switch on the circuit, current in the inductor, current in the circuit will increase from zero to maximum. Then the current will be steady. We are talking about DC current and not AC here. Current will first increase from zero to maximum, then it will remain constant, and when you put the switch off, current will decrease. While the current is increasing, battery will supply energy, and that energy will be stored in the inductor. When the current becomes steady, energy in the capacitor, energy in the inductor remains steady or constant. When you put the circuit off, battery is removed. Whatever energy was stored in the inductor, half Li square, same energy will be given back to the circuit. We got it? That is why now when you suddenly switch off the circuit, sometimes you hear sparking, sometimes you see sparking, not here. Why it is sparking? Because of this inductor, because it will give out its energy in the form of the stored energy in the form of a spark. So that energy will be dissipated in an arc. Got my point? So what we mean to say here in short, we mean to say the only element of a circuit that consumes energy in the form of heat, that dissipates the energy in the form of heat, is resistor. All the other fellow, they store energy in one process and they dissipate energy in the other process. In case of capacitor, when it is getting charged, it is storing energy. When it is getting discharged, it is giving back energy. In case of inductor, when the current is increasing, it is storing energy. When the current is decreasing, it gives back the same amount of energy. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Now, as we saw, the magnetic energy per unit volume, du by dv. We saw electrical energy stored per unit volume. Yes or no? The electrical energy stored per unit volume was half epsilon naught E square. Wherever in space you have electrical field, we have energy stored in the form of electrical energy. How much energy is stored in a small volume, unit volume? du by dv, it is known as electrical energy density or energy density of electric field. Half epsilon naught E square. Similarly, if you have a magnetic field in space anywhere, energy is stored in the form of magnetic energy. Or this is known as energy density of magnetic field. And what will be the formula? If you remember this formula, you should be able to make the formula for magnetic field. What will the formula for magnetic field? Half की जगह half, E square की जगह B square, epsilon naught in the numerator, so mu naught in the denominator. Why it is so? When epsilon naught comes in the numerator, mu naught comes in the denominator, why it is so? Any idea? Have you ever thought about it? Why is it so? Such questions are coming a lot in your JEE mains as well as advanced. Figure shows an inductor resistor are connected in parallel to a battery through a switch. The resistance of R is same as that of the coil, which makes L. So both the resistances are same. Remember, as I told you, no electrical appliance is a pure resistor, no electrical appliance is a pure inductor. Everything is a combination. Everything is a combination of all the appliances are combinations of resistance, capacitance, and inductance. The ratios may be different. Sometimes resistance may be very high. Sometimes capacitance must be very high, can be very high. Sometimes resistance can be very high. But as such, they are all combinations of this. Okay. In this case, you have an inductor and resistor are connected in parallel to a battery to a switch. The resistance R is same as that of coil that makes the inductor. Two identical bulbs are put in each arm of the circuit. Which of the two bulbs lights up earlier when the switch is closed? Which one will light up earlier? Simple question. Which bulb will light up earlier? And why? Who is going to give me the answer? No one. Which one will light up earlier? It's obviously bulb number Q will light up earlier because as soon as you put the switch on, current will try to increase. The inductor has this property of opposing the rate of change of current because of induced EMF. Some people also call it back EMF, and hence it will not allow sudden change of current, and hence this branch will glow a bit later. Remember, I told you at t is equal to 0, whenever you put the switch on, resistance of the capacitor is 0, but resistance of the inductor is infinite. It does not allow current to flow. Do we remember this? Yes or no? Do we remember this? As soon as you put the switch on, capacitor behaves as 0 resistance and inductor behaves as infinite resistance. After a long time, when the steady state is reached, capacitor behaves as infinite resistance, open circuit, and inductor behaves as short circuit. It behaves as no resistance is present. Remember that because we will be using it in questions. Will the bulbs be equally bright after some time? And the answer lies in the logic. After some time, that is infinite time, the resistance of the inductor becomes 0. It just behaves as a short circuit. So both the resistances are same. Since both the resistances are same, then we have same glowing of the two bulbs. Now this is periodic EMI. This is what I said. Here what we are doing here, we are rotating a coil inside a magnetic field. Basically, we are changing the angle between B and A, and this is how you have induced EMF, and this is how AC current is generated. E naught sine omega t. Do we remember this? E naught sine omega t, where E naught is NBA omega. Do we remember this? I told you that in the previous class. Yes or no? Yes or no? Okay. Before ending today's class, we'll just finish this small concept of transformer. Very simple concept. There are questions sometimes which have come in JE on transformer. A transformer has this laminated core made up of soft iron. Then you have this primary, alternating current is fed to the primary. Number of turns in the primary and number of turns in the secondary are not same. If the number of turns in the secondary are more, it is known as step up. If it is less, it is known as step down. Whatever flux is linked in coil number 1 primary, we assume that a transformer is very highly efficient. Efficiency is almost close to 100%. So same flux is associated or linked with the secondary coil or 100% efficiency N5. Oh, N5 क्यों लिख रहा हूं मैं? NP into 5P will be equal to NS into phi S. Do you remember this? Number total flux will remain same. Yes or no? Yes. So this is when we say it is 100% efficient. Yes or no? 100% efficient. It's the 100% efficient transformer. No flux is lost. In fact, they are not 100% efficient, but you can have a transformer which is almost 100% efficient. They are efficient up till 99.99 and such. Someone has drawn this lines. Let me, I can't do anything with these lines. I'll read it afterwards. So there are two types of transformers, step up and step down. The number of turns in the secondary is more than the number of turns in the primary. It is a step up transformer. It steps up the voltage, else it steps down the voltage. When the voltage is stepped up, converts low voltage but high current into high voltage, low current. You must be knowing this. Why we want to decrease the increase the voltage? Because when you increase the voltage, current decreases and hence the power loss decreases, and hence we can transfer this AC current or AC voltage from a far off place to a near off place. In yesterday years, there was a big debate between DC and AC, which is more efficient. In all the electronic devices that you use, whether it's a mobile phone or a cell or anything, they are all DC devices. They do not work on AC. But the problem with DC is it cannot be transferred to a large place. So you always have to keep batteries. AC can be transferred to distant places because it can be easily stepped up or stepped down using a very simple device which is highly efficient. This is the transformer. A step down transformer converts high voltage, low current into low voltage, high current, where you produce this AC voltage in your thermal power stations, on your electrical hydroelectric power stations, you produce it at a high voltage. Then you increase it up, you step it up, very high voltage, 44,000 volt, 44 lakh volts. Then you transfer it from those places to inside your town. You step it down in steps. In front of your house, you will find a small bijli ka khamba, which has a small transformer. That transformer brings it down to 220 volts, approximately 230 to 240 volts, and that is what reaches your home. Sometimes 210, sometimes 220, sometimes 230. That is why your voltage fluctuates at times, and that's why you have some stabilizers. In our times, when I was small, we used to use stabilizers because the voltage used to fluctuate a lot. Do we know this or not? Yes, we know this. Please be ready for questions on this. There might be a question for efficiency 100%. ES by EP is equal to NS by NP. ES means voltage in the secondary. EP means voltage in the primary. It's directly proportional to the number of turns in the secondary and number of turns in the primary. I hope you know this. Yes or no? But when voltage steps up, current steps down. And you must remember this condition. When voltage steps up, current steps down. So no power loss. Power output is equal to power input, and hence you have this relation Vs by Vp. Voltage in the secondary divided by voltage in primary will be Ip by Is, or to combine all these equations, you will have this Vs by Vp is equal to Ip by Is equal to Ns by Np. And normally whenever a question comes on transformer, it will be a question based on ideal transformer. So you will always assume that Vp by Vs by Vp is equal to Ns by Np is equal to Ip by Is is equal to N. That should be your assumption. But real transformers are different. Their efficiency is not 100%. So what is the efficiency of a transformer? Efficiency of transformer is efficiency of any device is output divided by input. Whatever is the output divided by whatever is the input. In this case, output is power in the secondary, input is power input in the secondary, Vs, Is, divided by VPIP into 100%. That is the power of a transformer. And then you can solve a small question based on this. There are questions that I've seen it on transformers coming, no one does it. And therefore, you might land up in trouble. A small town with a demand of 800 kilowatt. That is the power at 220 volt voltage. Is situated 15 kilometers away from an electric power generating 440 volt. The resistance of the two wire carrying power is 0.2, 0.5 ohms per kilometer. This is a very practical question. The town gets from the line through a 4000 to 220 step down transformer at a substation in the town. Well done. Estimate the line power loss in the form of heat. How much energy is lost in the form of heat? How much power must the plant supply, assuming there is a negligible power loss due to leakage? Characterize the step up transformer at the plant. So how do you solve this question? So you just use simple things, put them together. This is the diagram. 440 volts it is generating. You step it up, you bring it to 4000 volts. Then you step it down and bring it to 220 volts. 800 kilowatt is the requirement. 15 kilometers is the line. This is the substation which is stepping it down. This is the power plant which is stepping it up. For the substation, power is given, voltage is given. So you will know how much is the current in this branch. Current is this much. This much is the current that you need in the secondary of the substation. So what is the current in the primary of the substation? This is the primary of the substation. This is the secondary of the substation. You know the current in the secondary. From there, you can find the current in the primary of the substation. Current in the primary of substation, this much. This much current should come in the primary of the substation. That means this much current will be flowing through this cable of 15 kilometers. You can find this total resistance. You can find this total resistance, and from there you can find the losses. Look at the losses. 600 kilowatt is the loss. Simply loss. 800 kilowatt is the requirement there, but you'll have to produce 1400 at least, because 600 is going to get lost in the supply line. Are you getting my point, everyone? From here you can find out what is the voltage in the secondary. So you know the voltage in the secondary, this much voltage you must create, and from there you can have how much you need the transformer to be around. Are you getting my point? This is how calculations are done. Do we understand this?
Yes, sir.
So please remember this question. Such questions can come. You will have no idea about what is going to come. So you just go through this. Then there is a small portion on the losses of this transformer. It is copper loss or heating loss because of current flowing. This is copper loss, flux leakage loss. Why it is flux leakage loss? Flux ring in the primary and flux ring in the secondary are not same. Some flux is always lost. So these are the flux losses. Then there are iron losses. Iron losses consist of two parts: hysteresis losses because of the hysteresis curve, eddy current losses because of eddy currents being generated. So you must go through this. A question based on eddy currents came recently 2 or 3 years back in IIT, where they had a magnet and they had a disc and they were rotating the disc. They were moving the magnet. You have to tell whether the disc will rotate in the same direction or disc will rotate in the other direction. That was based on eddy currents. I will send you this sheet. Go through this sheet, or you already have one sheet. I will send you this sheet for transformer. Have a look at this sheet. If you still don't understand, You can always ask me for help and I will be helping you out. So I'll be winding this class here. We have done transformer, we have done inductor. The only thing that remains is the RL circuit, the growth of current and decay of current, which we'll be dealing in the next class, that is tomorrow. The class from my side is over. If you have to ask anything, you can ask. Else it's a wrap from my end. Bye-bye.